Okay, this is the Switch-Pro. It's kind of the final piece of the puzzle for electronics in this car. So I highly recommend using a Switch-Pro. I'm a low voltage electronics guy. It's kind of what I do for a living. I don't do it for a living in cars or UTVs, anything, but the way the Switch-Pro is designed and the way it operates and everything is by far the best way to handle low voltage switching and management and things like that. It's a very intelligent system. It's very smart. In my opinion, it is worth the money. I know that's subjective, but I don't think it's too expensive for what it does for you and the amount of trouble that it saves you. It has all the relays. It has all of the voltage management and everything built in. The 9100, which is the model I have, the SP9100, it comes with Bluetooth. So there's an app that you can download and control your car via Bluetooth. It has a low voltage warning and management where if your car goes below a certain voltage, it'll turn off all your loads for you. There's only one main power power input on the thing, so you don't have to run power wires to each individual switch. If you're running multiple rocker switches in the past, you know how much of a pain in the butt that is. And there's one very simple, easy way to run to your switch panel, just a single harness that's intelligent and it's a small harness. It does not have like a traditional rocker switches. If you have like 4 of them in your dash, you have to run like 16 wires to that and loop in and out for your power, your ground, and things like that. Whereas this is just one clip-in harness. It's included in the box, and it's just far more efficient to operate this way. They have these cool stickers or decals, labels that are backlit. You can backlight it in different ways or in different colors to match your car. And there's been a few occasions where I couldn't really get exactly the button that I wanted, with the proper icon and text or whatever. So you can deal with something, like that's close as far as the naming goes, or they have blanks. If I'm not mistaken, you can buy more decal kits also for different icons or whatever that you might need. So comes with the harness. This is the little keypad. Of course, the actual Switch-Pro module, which is incredibly thin for amount of voltage or amount of current that it handles, and relays and everything built in. But technically, it's not relays. It's all solid state, which means there's a circuit board in here that does it. It's not an actual switch like those rocker switches that we use. It's an actual switch that opens and closes when you press the switch. Like these. Like something like this that's more traditional has 4 or 5 connections that you have to make depending on whether or not it's backlit. And when you do this, it actually opens a gap in the circuit. So it is opening up. But these are limited as to how much current they can pass. I got these XTCs for my RMAX, and I really like them, the XTC switches. I think they're cool. When you're using rocker switches, I highly recommend them. I just don't use them in the YXZs mostly because the YXZ does not have very many locations for the rocker switch. You can get some dash plates and things like that to add a bunch of rocker switches, but the problem with that is it takes up the place where like I put my rugged radios, and so you're just kind of really limited, in my opinion, in the Yamaha YXZ. An X3 has 10, maybe 8 rocker switch locations from the factory just sitting in the dash, and the RMAX is the same way. I think it has 8, so it's a bunch. Okay, so the Switch-Pros includes the module, the keypad, this main power wire with a built-in fuse. I think that's not sure what kind of fuse it is. It looks like it's a mini bus or something like that. I can't tell. Then it comes with the big harness here, which is where all your switch loads come out. And it's got a diagram on the actual SP9100 here as to what they are. So the higher current ones, which I'll have to look up. I think it's 30. Yeah, it's 35 amps can be switched on loads 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then switch loads 1, 2, 3, 4, I think are half that. 20 amp. So that's still 20 amp. So all of these switch more current than this switch is capable of doing by itself, which is why you would have to wire up separate relays in other systems. Relays are a bitch to wire up. It's another bunch, like 4, 5 wires to run from your switch to the relay. Whatever. I'm just telling you that Switch-Pros is by far the way to go. This harness has all those connections on it. I don't use them all, but basically that plugs in there, and then it tells me, like here, these 2 purple wires in the diagram are switch load number 7. So these 2, you just crimp them together, and you just parallel or internally paralleled. They're the same thing. It's just double the gauge of the wire when you connect them both. And then like it's got an ignition wire, so when you turn your key on, you can trigger certain things to light up or whatnot. Has a small ground wire. The reason why it's a small ground wire is because it's only grounding the little built-in backlight and powering up this unit. It is not grounding the 35 amps worth of current or whatever you have to all your switch legs, which is a total, what is that? It's like 200 amps total. I don't know if it does all of that total. It probably has a maximum. I'm guessing 100 amps. I don't know, I'll have to look further into it, but this 4-gauge wire is capable of running all that current, whereas this dinky little ground wire right here is not. The reason being is each of your accessories, like your light bar, for example, it has a black wire come off of it that you should ground straight to the battery or to the chassis. It does not ground through the Switch-Pro. So that's why you have a big fat power wire, but not a big fat ground wire, because the ground is not being managed through the Switch-Pro. All your ground wires go directly to chassis or battery terminal. So this harness for all of those things, I'll get more into that wiring later. And then it has this harness for your keypad, which is a nice sealed connector. Very well done in my opinion. It's too long for what I use it for. In Brooklyn's car, it's like way too long. I'm using like 1 foot in her car, but in Carter's car here, the blue one, I'm gonna only use about 3 feet. So I guess if I wanted to, I could cut this, but I don't know. I'll see where I can manage the slack. So anyways, this goes to the keypad end. This goes to the module end, plugs in here. So it's really just 2 harnesses and a master power wire that you got to wire up for this thing. I think it's incredibly simple for what all it does for you. They include a bag full of various crimp connectors. I like using crimps, barrels. These have heat shrink attached to them too. So you got a heat gun, you can shrink wrap all of those connections down, which makes a lot of sense in an off-road vehicle. It includes a little bit of sleeve and a little bit of loom that you can use in various places as well. I love using sleeve. I think it's great. Sometimes you can't use it because you have to put it over the wire. So in that situation, you'll use split loom, which actually opens up. You can add it to your wire after you've already run it. And then this mounting plate, I've never used, but like so, you can mount it, and it's pretty versatile. It's got a little sliding adjustable pattern there. I assume this kind of doubles as a heat sink as well. I don't know that for sure. I've never really worried much about that because in the grand scheme of things, I'm really not using that much current. This blue car is different though. I do have a lot of lights on this thing, so I might double check that to see if I'm inside the total current range as well as the heat range. So I'll look into that further. Oh yeah, in this also is this little mount. See these little brackets that are in the box here? That's a handy little clamp mount to attach this keypad to a desirable location. And if I'm not mistaken, there is a template Yeah, so this is a real size template. So you can cut this out with a pair of scissors and go tape it to your car in the place that you want to do it, and you know, recess your keypad for a flush mount. Or there's lots of aftermarket mounts. I know like Weller just recently made a cool X3 mount to, you know, sticks to the dash, had a nice billet or something like that. I think they make a YXZ mount as well that goes up in the dash, but again, it's kind of where I have my radios, or maybe the space above that where I will put some gauges or something in the future. So I'm not going to do all that. All right, the only thing that I'm really going to assemble, I guess, before we get in the car is I'm just going to bolt on the main positive power terminal. This end that has the little connector, I guess, insulator cap is the end that goes on the actual Switch-Pros. The other end has the fuse really close to it, and that goes by the battery. You can't really mess this up because the end that you can't use, or you're not supposed to use, does not fit on the Switch-Pro. So I'm going to turn it this way. I looked at Brooklyn's car, and this is the way I had it last on her car, and I'm pretty happy with the way it went in there. So I'm going to kind of point it this way. You'll see why here in a minute. Most cars, you know, are going to be different depending on where you mount it and how you mount it, etc. So it's important that this piece of metal is covered and insulated well, because that is a direct line to the battery. You don't ever want to touch that, short that, or anything like that at all with anything at all. You don't ever use this as a terminal for other accessories. There's no need for any of that. All the accessories that you're ever connecting to this thing are coming out of the other harness that we'll walk through here in a minute. I'm surprised, but it's a 1/2 inch nut. I figured it would be metric, but who am I? So I'm going to go ahead and pull the insulator over the terminal so that that bad boy is sealed and never really seen or touched again. If you do ever short that with ground, if it ever touches a piece of bare metal, or if it ever touches a ground wire, then it will blow this fuse. If you ever overload the Switch-Pros, like if you hook up way too much stuff to this thing, and it doesn't go into protection, which it probably will, then this fuse will blow. But like I say, that's very, very unusual situation that would happen. Okay, so now I'm gonna hop in the car. Okay, so here I am in the car. This is looking at the console from the passenger side. Removed that that center console cover. These are my accessories going to the rear of the car. These are my accessories going to the front of the car. Here's the rugged radios, which are not going to be connected to the Switch-Pro. And then this harness is for the keypad. This is the Switch-Pro harness that's provided for that keypad. I've ran to the front dash near the radios. So I just pull these all to the side. So this is a factory harness. I just slide this relay off, pull it to the side, kind of just get it out of my way. Okay, so this little cubby is factory. Other than this large, this is a 4-gauge power cable with a fuse on it for the TubeWorks alternator kit. If you have an aftermarket alternator, you probably have something similar to this in here. If you have factory stator or factory charging system, then you won't have that. But otherwise, this is all factory arrangement. This is a factory ECU with a Weller tune, so that's why it's got their sticker. But otherwise, it's physically the same. This space is the same. The battery is also aftermarket. I got it from Weller Racing. It's a full throttle battery. Had them in all my YXZs. I recommend them. They're a good product. And they're well known in the power sports industry altogether. So here's the Switch-Pro that we just assembled on the bench. The reason I have the angle of that cable that way is because I use this little, there's one little, I guess, crevice there that works pretty well. This is the way I've mounted them. I get one screw in right here, a short screw goes into the plastic right there to kind of mount it. And then I route this cable around to the positive battery terminal. The reason you kind of need a T-shaped space. You kind of need a void in front of this, because this big harness with all of its connectors comes directly out of the front of it like this, as well as that harness for the keypad comes out of it right here. So the point is, you kind of need a T-shaped space. That's not real easy to find in some of these vehicles, but in the YXZ, that's where I've found it, and that's all in factory spots near all the factory electronics. So I thought it worked out pretty well. It's just kind of weird that it's kind of sandwiched between two pieces of plastic. It's not a heat problem. I love that the Switch Pro unit is so compact. It's tiny. It's less than ½ inch thick, and a relatively flat piece of hardware. All it has is these 3 harnesses or terminals on it coming out. So it's very powerful for its size. I think it's an awesome product. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is undo this power terminal and the factory battery bracket so that I can route this Switch Pro power wire underneath it. This is a great opportunity for me to lose some of these screws or bolts. So I'm going to do my best. I like to use the cup holder. When I'm working in the interior of the Yamaha. This is an 8mm, by the way. The factory hardware is 8mm. So is the battery terminal. It's also an 8mm. I'm just going to undo it just to kill the car. I'm going to pull the stuff to the side. Anytime you're working on electronics in a vehicle, it's a good idea to kill the car. Just kind of a safety thing. And also, you can disconnect the main ground and just as effectively kill the car. Whether the positive is undone or the ground is undone, the battery will be dead to the chassis, to the car that way. So, okay, I'm just gonna kind of leave those things there for now. I think what I'm gonna do is go ahead and plug in this thing. This is the keypad harness. And you'll see me do service loops. I like to have, 6 inches, 8 inches spare on all the wires that I can. I do that just for serviceability. If all of your wires are really tight and cut to length and everything, it's difficult to work with them. The good news is the Switch Pro harness has tons of length on it. And like I talked about earlier, whenever you have a finite amount of length on your wiring, I try to avoid cutting off any more than I have to. So I won't be cutting these back very far. I will use this harness as my service loop. So that's that. Now that I've put the Switch Pro in there, I can't really see the diagram that's on it. So I'm gonna go get the included manual, which has the same diagram. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that tight, snip this, and call me weird, but I'm going to go ahead and plug this in and begin making my connections like this. As long as the car's dead, that's really not a problem. So, okay, I'm going to get the power wires kind of routed. This is the rugged radios. It is not going through the Switch-Pro. I'm just kind of routing them, getting them around everything. I don't know why Rugged puts a power or puts a fuse on the ground and the power wire. I guess technically your ground wire is pulling just as much current as your power wire, so whatever. This is the ground wire. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it. It's the black one. Comes with a terminal already on it, so I'll tell you what I can do is go ahead and ground everything. So your ground block, if you have a bunch of accessories, you might consider getting some sort of aftermarket ground block because each of your accessories needs its own ground. So the Switch-Pro handles all the positive terminals through it, but everything still needs to be grounded. And that can be a lot. Some of the accessories in the back of the car, I just grounded to the chassis. I didn't run a separate wire all the way up here, but that's not always the case. It's not always possible. I already have a few on there from Weller installing the power commander. Also, it's important to note that you're not going to get shocked. Don't be as afraid of DC power. 12 volts DC is, even if it's tons of current, it doesn't matter because you are not a good enough conductor for 12 volts DC to ever hurt you. The only way I could ever see it actually hurting is if the wire just got extremely hot. So if there was a dead short between these terminals and with the wire, and you touch the wire might be hot, but there's basically no chance that, I mean, look, you can put your tongue on both of these all day long and you're not going to ever get shocked. So you could damage your equipment if you hook it up wrong or if you short it, you know, hit positive to ground or something like that, but you're not physically in risk of being harmed. In a house, like doing electrical work, working with lights and things like that in a house, 120 volts AC will definitely give you a little buzz. But in cars, there's never really a risk of that. Okay, so this is one of those 4-conductor wires that goes up front. In this case, these wires are not grounded up front, so the green and the black here are ground wires. I need to crimp a terminal on and ground them there. So what I'm going to do is strip this wire back. They have a ripcord in this particular wire. Not all wire has ripcords, but this one does. I usually rip it back to about where my label is, and I just have a little handwritten marker for what wire is what. I have a hard time doing this type of work with gloves on, so this is one of the few occasions that you'll see me video working on a car and stuff without gloves on. I wear gloves as much as possible when working, but when handling crimps and you know, twisting wire gauge and stuff like that, or twisting stranded wire together and stuff like that, I just can't hardly work with gloves. So here I am. So here's my 2 positive conductors. One of these goes to the halos, one of these goes to the rock lights in the front of the car. I'm going to throw them to the side, not hook them up yet. The ground conductors, which in this case are black and green, I'm going to route forward at approximately the correct length. I'll do a short loop and then I will cut them. Something else I like to do is I twist my pairs together. Anytime there's a pair that are going to the same destination, I twist them Kind of helps keep your wires from having stragglers. When you're working with a lot of small wires, it's real easy to have one just kind of straggling around, like this thing right here that's sitting by itself. It just kind of does its own thing. Okay, I'm looking through this little bag they gave us. I don't see a ring terminal that'll fit two 16 gauge wires. I'll get a ring terminal and the book. All these wires, I'll have to do a good tying up of them once we're done. But for now, I'm just kind of ballparking them, if that makes sense. Generally speaking, on the terminals, I put the bigger terminals on the bottom, just so they have more contact with the actual terminal. Just so if they are running a lot more current or some more current, that they get sufficient contact. Plus, it kind of gives a good foundation for all these smaller terminals to stack on top of. Okay, so that's those. Here's one more. Not the rock lights or cage accessories, it's the light bar. So the light bar is a pretty big load. It's the biggest load I have. I think it's around 30 amps total. This is a 50-inch Baja Designs light bar, which is their, I don't know if it's their biggest, but it's the biggest I've ever put on a side-by-side. So I'm borderline. I'm doubling 16 gauge conductors. So when you pair up when you double, I guess what am I trying to say? When you double up wire gauge, it doesn't necessarily go to the next size down. So like two 16 gauges is not necessarily a 14 gauge. It's the math doesn't work out that way because of the diameter of a round object. There's math with the number of copper strands and copper content that's in a round 16 gauge versus what's in a round 14 gauge. So actually two 16 gauges together is something like a 13 gauge. It's pretty close. I don't know how to look it up, but I will point out it is the same gauge as what's coming out of the Switch-Pro, so that makes me feel a little bit better. They have doubled up the gauges on their larger switch legs, or their larger switched outputs. I like to kind of trim up where I strip this wire back because it's not real clean the way it strips. Okay, so here's my two ground conductors. They come out, do a nice little service loop. I'm going to leave them at the length that they're at. And I just realized I don't have another ring terminal. Okay, so those will come down and around something like that. Positives will move forward. Okay. Let's see if I can go find a ring terminal. I need to get once I get the grounds on, I can continue managing all the positives. By the way, if y'all are unfamiliar with the way crimps work, let me show you. This is a good opportunity. So when you smash down your crimp, you want the little pointy part to go, I don't know how to say this, to go so that it brings the split in the metal down and kind of double clamps around the wire. So crimps have, it's basically a round, piece of soft metal that that when you squeeze your tool, you want it to kind of clamp together like a fist around your wire. If you switch your crimpers around like this, then it will do the opposite. It'll cave them around. It'll still hold your wire probably, but the proper design is like this here, like I'm showing you there, where when you push it in, it sandwiches all the little copper strands. So some of you guys might already know that stuff. I've found that a lot of people in UTVs are not comfortable with wiring, and it seems to be kind of be a area of mystery, so I'm trying to cover even the fundamentals of low voltage wiring. Okay, I am not 100% sure, but I think that's all of my grounds. And this terminal is pretty sloppy in my opinion. It's got a lot on it. And that bolt now has a pretty good stack. You can see there, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 aftermarket terminals. In addition to the factory one is 7. So that's a lot. I'm going to tell you right now, if you have a Switch-Pro, you should probably get a ground block. If you don't use a ground block, then I recommend grounding your accessories to the chassis near the accessory so that you're not running a long wire all the way back to the battery terminal and then doing this onto your battery. It's just not good practice in my opinion. It's going to work. And as you can see, I'm doing it here, so I'm not going to say it's a nightmare, but there are definitely more desirable ways to do it. I think Razors have like under hood terminals that organize wiring, and they're just kind of built for aftermarket stuff, which is great. I respect them for doing that. But the Yamaha is just not that friendly. Okay, I'm going to come back to this. I know it looks messy. I'm going to come back to that after I get the rest of these kind of laid out, my cable routing, and get that factory battery holder bracket back on and stuff, and I'll make sure to route these wires properly and tie them up. Okay, so moving on, here is some accessories that I'm going to wire up now. I'm going to try to make sure all my wire follow the same route. That's important in my opinion when you are adding accessories and adding stuff, running wire. Keep your wires running in a common, we call it a snake. If you have a lot of wires, keep them going in the same path, and that keeps it organized. If you start running some that way and some this way, some on top, some underneath a bracket or another snake and stuff like that. That's how it really gets sloppy really quick. Factory wiring is just in the way. I mean, look at this stuff. I can't believe that they do it like this. I guess they have their reasons, but it's just the fact that we have just loose things at random lengths. I mean, this wire is intertwined with the other one, and it is 6 inches too long. So I don't understand why they do things like that. I guess it's part of their manufacturing and their production line and stuff, but when they put these cars together, it's I'm sure it's tough to stay organized. I'm going to trim this back a little bit more. So this is a unusual combination in this one. There is no ground wire. All of these in this are the positive conductor of an accessory. I'm not using the black wire at all, so I'm just snipping it short. The reason is these 3 accessories all go up to the cage, like I did in one of those other videos, and all of those accessories are grounded to the chassis in the back of the car. I didn't bother running all of their wires up here separately, and it minimized the number of conductors I needed running up here as well. So I didn't show that on the video, but basically I just find a piece of metal somewhere on the frame that's flat, and you can scratch a little bit of the paint off. You can use a grinder, sandpaper. Sometimes I just scratch it with my Kleins, something metal, and then put a ring terminal on it and put a screw through it. Self-tappers is what I use. Okay, so I'm going to start with my high power accessories. So it's my lights. You know what? No, I'm gonna put this bracket back on, because I need these wires to enter this cavity at the proper length. So I'm gonna go ahead and tie these up, put that factory bracket back on, and then start connecting all the positives to the harness. All right, so I went ahead and zip tied these wires together in some sort of organized fashion. I took the grounds, basically just kind of made them in a loop, tucked that slack down here, and put the connected both the power and the ground terminals, and put the battery strapped back in there. So right now the Switch-Pro is hot. It is connected to power. I normally wouldn't recommend doing that this early, but I'm gonna connect all these positive leads now. They're still off, and like I say, I'm not really risking any kind of shorting or anything here. It's just a matter of working with the wires. I wanted to do that so that I could just establish my cable routing and everything. So it's pretty much what I've got done now. I'm ready to connect all of these. All of these individuals here are positive wire leads for each of the switch legs. Some of them are going to be switched together, like these two are the mirror lights. The ground wires are grounded at the front of the car for each of these, but these are the positive leads. They're both going to be connected together. And then like this pair that's twisted together, this is for the light bar. So it's just doubled up. It's the same switch leg, but they're doubled up. These are individual switch legs, and then these are individual switch legs. So pretty small loads. Ultimately, the only decent sized load is this light bar. And I guess that's it. So here's the these are the crimp connectors that come with the Switch-Pro. They have heat shrink built into them. I really like them. So basically I'm going to cut my individual switch legs to length and connect them to the Switch-Pro harness with a service loop built into them. Now, you kind of want to put some thought into the layout of this. So here's the diagram for the Switch-Pro. Sorry, my light is kind of weird. I got a shadow. But so your loads, if you can't really pay attention to pin out numbers. That's not really what you need to go by. Just look at what each one does. So for your switch legs, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So your big loads, so like 20 amp maximum is your 4 small loads that are single wire, and then your larger loads are 35 amp maximum, which is this double wire on this other side. So you want to pay attention to the layout and how you connect them, because by default, the way your keypad is, the way your keypad switches is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I only have one load that's big enough that should be on the high amp switch legs. So my light bar needs to be on 5, 6, 7, or 8. Over on Brooklyn's car, it's in position 5. So that's where I'm going to make sure I hook it up here. I'm going to try to duplicate the controls as much as possible on her car as I have on this car, or on this car as I have on her car, so that it's familiar with us whenever we switch drivers and stuff like that. So the way I have it laid out over there is whip lights, dome light, light bar, and then I'm going to switch it, but hers is rock lights and then halos. So I have the mirror lights on this car, and I'm going to add mirror lights to her car. So I'm going to actually put the mirror lights in number 7, because they are the next most current to be drawn. So ultimately, I only have 6 switch legs for 8 outputs, and so that's all I'm going to use for now. But I'm going to hook them up in that same order as hers is. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and start with, I'm going to go ahead and start with number 5, which is that light bar, just so I get that one right where it needs to be. So that's the green pair is switch load 5, and that's going to be my light bar. So I just reach in the harness. Just to keep it from getting tangled, I try to make sure I pull it out the same way it comes through, so that you don't just have a bunch of tangled wires. So I'm going to basically make a loop with every pair like that, and then connect them. So these 2 green wires will connect to these 2 coming from the light bar. And that's ultimately it. We're just going to do this like 6 times, and then we'll end up connected. So just in the interest of time, I'll kind of do a fast forward, do a time lapse of this video, or of me connecting each of these loads. Okay. Okay, so that's our first pair, and that's basically what our service loop is going to look like. So I'm going to match that loop with all of these others, and that's the length that they're all going to be at. After I crimp them all, I'll go back and heat them so that the shrink wrap or the heat shrink latches down on each one. Also, I should mention on these switch legs that are the high current, so switch legs 5, 6, 7, and 8 have a 35 amp maximum power draw. They're just doubled up inside. So these are the same thing. That's why they're the same color. They're internally paralleled. So I could have got a bigger crimp and crimped both these together and both these together. It's the same thing. It's all the same connection. The only reason I did the two here is because I happen to have two wires coming from the light bar. So it's really not there's really not a reason for it to be separated. Or they can be parallel together. So if you have one larger crimp and you can do them both, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Okay, so that's the switch legs. I'm going to individually test them before I tighten the heat shrink and everything. So next up is the ignition wires. There's one ignition wire, comes off the Switch-Pro. This is what triggers the Switch-Pro to actually power up and turn on. Ideally, when you turn your key forward, the Switch-Pro powers up. And then your switches and things like that are active and you can work them. The one time that this ignition wire can be overridden is with Bluetooth. So the instructions are pretty clear about this, that whether the key is on or off, your phone can Bluetooth connect and turn on any of your switch legs. That's something that's programmable. So in the programming section, it shows you how to go in and turn that on and off if you don't want that to happen. And then the other thing I do is there's a white wire that's labeled as the trigger 2/lights. And what this is the backlighting on your keypad. So it's designed for, like, if you're in a truck and your headlights turn on or your parking lights are on, then the Switch-Pro knows it's nighttime and you want the backlight on your buttons. So what I do is I want the backlight on all the time in my side-by-side, day or night. So so I just twist both of these together, the light blue and the white wire, and I tie them both into an ignition trigger on the car. So the Power Commander already has an ignition trigger built in or tapped in. So there's a little accessory fuse block back here that's added. And so I'm just going to tap into this wire, and all it's doing is sensing trigger. It's not pulling any current from any of this. It's just sensing whether it's on or off with the key, and then it just triggers the stuff. So it's not actually drawing any current, so you can tap in a few wires into that if you need to, because it's not really using any power or pulling any power from it. So I'm going to pull this tap out. I'm going to reroute it because it's kind of twisted around some others. So I'm going to pull that tap out, and I'm just going to cut this wire and add a barrel connector that has these in it also to trigger that. All right, so I attached this these two ignition wires. One's the blue one, the light blue one is the ignition wire. The white one is the backlight wire. As you see here, I just attached a barrel connector with the 3 small wires going in one way and then the 1 larger wire going out the other. So my keypad's just laying here. Everything's just on factory default settings. So my first one is the whip lights. They're working. Second one is my dome lights. They're working. Third one is my light bar, which is not installed. I'm not going to press that button because it would activate these wires that are loose. No harm really because they're not touching anything, but just goes. So the next one is my, these are my rock lights. Okay, all 4 of those are working. And next one is the halos. All 4 of those are working. And let's see, next one is here is my mirror lights. Ooh, man, those things are bright. That's one of them, but one's not working. I'm gonna troubleshoot that. It might be the ground, or it might be the positive lead, it might be in the harness, I don't know, but I'll troubleshoot that. Okay, now it's just time to heat shrink all these. I've tested all my loads. All the wiring is good. I'm going to heat shrink all of these barrel connectors that have the built-in heat shrink. And then I'm going to put a couple more zip ties here and here. And then I'm really done with the Switch-Pro part. These are extra wires that I'm not using. The pink wire is for another trigger. I'm not going to use that, but one example of that is like you could maybe hook up a reverse trigger. So when your car goes in reverse, it makes reverse lights switch on or something like that. It's programmable, so there's all kinds of cool things you can do with that. I'm not really going to get into programming on this video. I might try to do like a screen record or something on my iPhone to see if I can program it, but essentially, like the programming is the easiest part of it all. There's just a menu in the app. You download the app, you connect to the Bluetooth to your device. You can name it. You can put a password on it, which I highly recommend. So whenever you're out on the trail or in the dunes, and there's 100 cars around you, not everybody can just connect to your car and mess with your lights. But you name it, put a password on it. You name your individual switches, and then you can program stuff like your minimum voltage. That's really cool. That's a feature I like to do, so that if your car goes below something like, I don't know, you could say 11 volts or something like that, and it kills all switch legs. You could make it so that it leaves on one or something like that. And then there's like a memory program in there. The master switch is kind of neat, where you can press one button, but it triggers like 5 legs to be switched on and off. Stuff like that. But that's all in the programming. It's pretty simple. It really is. The instructions have written programming instructions, but if you can operate an iPhone, you can program it really easily. You just download the app, connect to the Bluetooth, and then name your things. Other than that, you pretty much leave it all on default. So anyways, where I was going with that is the pink wire is an extra trigger wire. I'm not going to use that. I am going to cut off the end where it was stripped a little bit, and all these unused wire, I'm just going to put a cap on them. One of those ice cream cones, crimps that just kind of is a cap. And then I'll just twist them up in here and zip tie them with the rest of the group. The double blue wire is switch leg 6 that I'm not using, one of the big ones. And then the yellow wire is switch leg 4 that I'm not using, one of the small loads. So I'm only using 6 of the 8 outputs on this car, and I'll be able to use those others later if I ever want to. So that's it. If I haven't showed you the shrink heat wrap, basically, so this is just a Milwaukee cordless heat gun. It gets hot. It takes a little while, but once it does, so here's one I'll do. I gotta hold it really close. This heat gun does not get very hot, and it takes a while. You can get a cheap heat gun that's corded for, I don't know, they're not very expensive. I'm sure you can find one for $25 somewhere. This Milwaukee one is $100 or something like that, and it's battery operated, but look how long it's taken. You can use a lighter with open flame. I don't recommend that, but it's possible. I've done entire builds with just an open flame lighter to do my heat shrinking. So, okay, there it goes. So that one just got tight. There it goes. So the heat, I guess it's a certain temperature where it's just enough for the wrap to get tight, but not enough to damage the wire. So here they are. You can see there's one that's not, and there's one that is. So I'm going to go through and do that on all of these. I'm going to add a couple zip ties, put the ice cream cones on these unused wires here, and then I'm done with the wiring part of it. I've tested everything. It all works. I'm going to, last step here is I'm just going to put the labels on this keypad, and I'm going to cut it into this plastic panel up here under the dashboard. So that's it. This is the center console piece where the shifter, the parking brake, and the radios are. I decided not to use the template that's in the instructions. They actually do have a template that you can cut out. I decided not to do that. I'm probably going to in the end. All I did was just kind of measure it and measured. I'm going to put the keypad right here at the bottom, right below my radios. This is a different location than where it is in Brooklyn's car. Hers is further down on the console, and I don't like it there, but it's about the only place she can reach. I think there's some aftermarket mounts. I think Weller makes a new mount that goes up here, but I think that's too far. Whatever. I'm going to cut this factory panel and roll with it. I believe there is enough space under this. There's about a 1/2 inch gap by my calculation between this piece and the part that's under it when it's in the car. So here I go. I'm just going to use this oscillating saw, and it cuts this plastic like butter. So let's see. Okay, so it looks rough, I know. A little razor blade and some sandpaper can really clean up those edges. Gonna knock off the big chunks here, and then I'll test fit the keypad. I know my hole isn't perfectly square because I wasn't exactly scientific about the way I cut it out. So the real critical edge is this bottom edge right here, because that's the one that's mostly visible. So I'm going to do my best. I can tell by looking at it, it's kind of crooked. So I'm going to do my best to straighten that out and make sure that's real nice and clean. The top edge I'm less concerned about. And the sides, you know, I want to do my best, but the real critical one is the front one and then these two sides. The back one's hardly ever going to be seen. So something to point out, this keypad has very, very little bezel on it. I believe it's 1/8 of an inch all the way around, which is not very much. Plus, you really need to radius your corners correctly, because if you go to square edge cut here and a square edge cut here, your point might be visible from that corner. So I'm going to do what I can to kind of round off those corners instead of cutting it square wider. And then, so I'm going to mess with this a little bit, and then I'll chime back in. Okay, I think I got the hole about the right size. Test fit it a few times. Basically, I just cut that hole, you know, a little small at first, and then I kind of kept trimming it afterwards, and the edges were kind of rough. So I just kind of ran a razor blade alongside, and then just kind of some rough sandpaper run on the inside to get most of those edges off. Now this is not a good edge. This is not, you know, something that's cosmetically acceptable. But the fact that the keypad has that bezel, it'll kind of conceal that. This top corner is slightly visible. I'm a little worried about that. So I'm gonna see if I can get a little tighter or something on that. For the corners, I just put a drill bit like this in my drill. So I didn't cut the corners with the blade all the way to the edge. I kind of stopped short, and then I just used a drill bit like this and just kind of spun it and forced it into the corner at an angle. I didn't force to either side because, you know, you'll bore out like a half moon shape there. You have to do it like in the corner of the angle. So now I got a smaller drill bit, and I'm going to drill out these rivets for the warning labels. I do this on all my cars because we don't need no warning labels. So just go around and do this 4 times and just drill the rivets right out. They're real soft. I think they're aluminum, but okay. And luckily, these warning labels do not have adhesive behind them or anything. It's just a little bit of junk in there from the gap. So, trash. Well, actually, this does have a little bit of adhesive on it, holding some junk, but okay. I'll just give everything kind of a wipesy here. Use an alcohol wipe, or this isn't even alcohol. This is just a regular, like, baby wipe, and it's maybe some, maybe need some, you know, glass cleaner, spray away or something to clean these things up where adhesive was. There is text on the keypad that says Switch-Pro, so make sure you have it oriented so that you can read the text the correct direction. Okay, there it is. You can see this corner that I was telling you about is cut too close, or was cut out too square, so there's a little bit of the cut that you can see. So the plastic is pretty tight on it, so you really don't even have to hold it in place. But I'm gonna put this little clamp on the back now. The Switch-Pro includes little threaded bolts and clamp that go there. As you can see, it is very thin, so it's not even really going past the depth of the plastic itself. This thing is so thin, so I don't really have to worry about back spacing other than just the harness, which in the car I have a hole drilled very, very close to where this thing comes in. So let me grab that kit. I should have done this first. Oh yeah, I forgot. I remember these. These little studs are actually the deepest part of the whole thing. So these little studs thread in like this. I might have to cut them off. And they thread in like a millimeter. I mean, not much at all. So, you see the way that works. I'm going to put in the other one, then I'm going to tighten the nuts, and then I'm going to cut off, well, I'll test fit it, and then I'll cut off those threads if I need to. This is a 5/16 small little bitty nuts. And I'd like to point out that the brackets are extremely thin, so they even bowed just by hand with a small socket. See if I can line up. Yeah, see there. They're pretty weak, so they bow and bend pretty easily. No big deal, but just so you know. Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and stick my labels on. These are the sheets that are included with the Switch-Pro. As you can see, they have a pretty good variety just right here, and I love the ones with icons on them, so I use those where I can, but I believe there is one that I do not have a icon for. So just make sure your Switch-Pro is clean, make sure your fingers are clean, and you just stick these on. There is not a, there's no complicated, there's no other steps, like that's it. There is no, I thought there was another silkscreen layer or something like that that goes on them. It's just really good adhesive and a nice clean surface. There's a little bit of overlap, so you have a slight margin of error, like you can kind of tell if you look close. That light bar label, see the little gray bar over here is thinner than on that side, so I'm a little off center, but that type of stuff is extremely difficult to see. Okay, so I guess I'm going to use this A-pillar one for my mirror lights. Let's see, here's another one here. I could use side lights. Windshield, there's one that says windshield. I think I'm going to go with A-pillar. That makes the most sense to me. My middle two are blank on the bottom row. So the one that I have that there is not a logo for or an icon is the Halos button, or the it's just the word Halo. Not a big deal, but I wish it had a cool icon like a circle or something like that. Okay, so I have dome light and rock lights left. Let me check that dome. Okay, so dome light goes here. And then instead of using one that said rock lights, I use this one that says underglow. I don't like the term rock lights. It doesn't really apply to me. I don't ride in the rocks, and there's no reason I'm gonna illuminate the rocks. Okay, so there it is. Now, go in the car. I'm almost positive I'm gonna have to cut these back pieces off, but I will, I'll see. I got lucky. There's this void here, which is where these little studs go. I just drilled a hole in the console plastic. Not real complicated, not real hard. It's a big empty void underneath there, so there's lots of wire space and everything under the console. Further down, there's mechanical linkage in the transmission and stuff, but on the 2019 and up Yamaha YXZ-1000s, that is all very accessible because there's no front radiator anymore. All the space under there. So, okay, so all I got to do is just kind of manage that wire. I just have to bring it down and make it a loop in that little void. And voila. There's a couple fasteners I need to put on to hold this in. There we go. I'm going to program the color of the lights. As you see right now, it's white. It's hard to tell because I got my flash on, but you can see they kind of go away when you don't light it up. So I'm going to program that. I was thinking blue, but the white light looks kind of cool because it's a white console. So All right, so light bar. Oh, hello. I don't have a light bar on the car yet. My goodness. Here's my blue dome lights. There's that mirror lights, underglow, whips, and my halos. Okay, Switch-Pro is installed, and that's it. I'm going to get into the programming, change the color of those buttons. I'll try them blue, and I'll name everything in the app and put a password on the Bluetooth, and that's it. Switch-Pro is installed. By far the easiest solution for switching several loads. There is no reason to be intimidated about it. It is much easier than hooking up. In this case, I would have to have 6 rocker switches. It took me forever to get these in the RMAX. Those 4 down in the console, and then I added 2 up there. These middle 2 are factory. It took hours to get all that wired, because each one of these has an individual power wire, each one has an individual ground, each one has an individual accessory light just for that light in the back, the backlighting, and then each one has a switch leg. All ran to them in different locations. It's a pain in the butt. Switch-Pro makes all of that much easier, much more robust, because all the fusing and everything is all built in. So there we go. I can put my console and body parts on now. Get a Switch-Pro. They're awesome. If you have any questions about this particular install, or maybe I can help you with yours, just make a comment on this video, and then that's it. Thanks for watching.